just also to remind you of the notation we introduced. Okay, so essentially we considered labeled trees. So this set capital Tn is a set of all labeled trees with n edges. So we pick one uniformly at random in this set. So it's an object like this. So it's a plain tree, but with labels. So the labels are the figures in red here. And the labels have to obey certain simple rules. Okay, the label of the root is always 0, and along each edge, the label can change by -1, 0, or +1. Okay? Okay, so we have this object, and in Gregory's first lecture, we saw that from such a labeled tree, we can construct a planar map, which is indeed a quadrangulation. So this is what Gregory called the CVS bijection. In fact, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We also need a sign plus or minus 1 in order to get a rooted quadrangulation, which is also pointed. But it's not very important for what I'm going to do today. You can think simply that starting from a labeled tree, you construct a quadrangulation. Okay? And there is an explicit device for constructing the quadrangulation. First of all, the vertex set, the set of vertices of the quadrangulation, will be the same as the vertex set of the tree. So this is just simply, in my formalism, the tree is defined as its set of vertices. So you can think that the vertex set of Qn is theta n plus one extra vertex, which we denote by V star. So we have the same vertices for the tree and the quadrangulation, and we have one more vertex somewhere here. Okay? Okay, so this gives you the set of vertices of the quadrangulation. And now, of course, you need to specify the edges. And, okay, this is what Gregory explained in his first lecture. So essentially what you do, well, with each corner of the tree, so you can imagine that you do the contour of the tree like this. Okay? So if you do this way, you're going to visit, of course, all vertices. So maybe I should use this, like this and so on. You visit all vertices, but more than that, you in fact visit all corners of the tree. So, okay, so a corner corresponds, if you want, to an angular sector between two consecutive edges around near a given vertex. Okay? So each time you meet a corner, you draw an edge from this corner to the next corner with smaller label. Okay? So typically you, for instance, well, here you start from the bottom of the tree. You would draw an edge from this vertex to the next corner with label -1, because you are at label 0 here, so you would do something like this, okay? And similarly, when you are here, you have a vertex with label 1, you have to draw an edge from this vertex to the next 0, that's it here, okay? And so on. For instance, -1, you go to -2, -2 here, you have to go to -3 here. And of course, you can do that as long as you have a vertex which has not minimal label. Of course, if you have a vertex with minimal label, well, you cannot find, by definition, a vertex with smaller label. So what you do, here the minimal label is -3. So when you have this label -3, this vertex with label -3, you draw an edge from this vertex to the additional vertex V star, which I have introduced. Okay? So, of course, I'm not here, these are just examples. I have not drawn all edges of the quadrangulation. I just drew a few of these edges. Okay? This is just to remind you of the construction. Now, if you draw all edges, you indeed get a quadrangulation. Okay, so there is perhaps a remark I want to make immediately, which will be useful later. Suppose you start, for instance, from this vertex here with label 1, and you do the following. You draw the edge from this vertex. It has only one corner, so there is not much choice. You draw an edge from this vertex, and you arrive at a corner with label 0, okay? And then you start from this corner again, so you do something like this, okay? I'm going to put arrows here just to indicate the path I'm constructing. So you go from this vertex with label 1 to the next vertex corner with label 0, then you go from this one to the next corner with label -1, and so on. So from this one, you go to the next with label -2, from this one to the next with label -3, and then you, of course, now you add the minimal label, so your next edge consider is the edge from this vertex to V star. And in this way, what you get indeed a geodesic path from this vertex to V star. Okay? So there is a natural way, so maybe I will call this path I have constructed here a simple geodesic. Okay, so this CVS bijection, in fact, gives you a very simple way of constructing geodesics from any vertex to V star, just going each time from the vertex where you are, I should say from the corner where you are, to the next corner with smaller label. Okay? Okay, so why is this a geodesic? Maybe I went a little bit too fast. I should have recalled first that there is a nice connection between the labels on the tree and the distances in the quadrangulation that we have constructed. So this connection is saying that for any vertex V of the quadrangulation except V star, so for any vertex of the tree, in fact, if you look at the graph distance between V star and this vertex, so this dqn is going to be the graph distance. In Qn, of course, not in the tree. You could also consider it in the tree, but here I consider it on the quadrangulation. This will coincide with the vertex of V minus the minimal vertex plus 1. Okay, so this L bar is just the minimal LU, okay, for you in the tree. Okay. Okay, so you see that in my construction here, which I explained with the arrows, each time I decrease the value of the label by -1. So this means each time I come closer to V star, okay, because each time the distance from V star decreases by -1. So each time I go one step closer to the root, to the vertex V star, I should say. So I really construct a geodesic from the vertex I started from to V star. Okay. So here I have drawn pictures corresponding to the contour function and the label function. I think in my lectures I called the label function, well, it was called the spatial contour function. It's just the same. So just to remind you of these objects, there is a way of writing their definition, which is to introduce what I call the contour sequence of theta n. So this is really, again, something very easy to understand. It just means that I do this contour, as I explained before, in orange, exploring the tree like this, and I record all the vertices that I visit in this contour. Okay, so of course some of the vertices are going to be visited more than once. Okay, so the first one is always the root of the tree, and the last one too. and then you have the other vertices. Okay, so what is the connection between this contour sequence and these two functions? Well, the contour function Cn is just the generation Cn of I is just the generation of Vni, and Vn of I records the value of the label of Vni. Okay, so this is for any I between 0 and 2n. Of course, then we extend Cn and Vn to functions of a real parameter just using linear interpolation. Okay, so essentially you are doing the contour of the tree, as we saw many times, and Cn records the generation at which you arrive. Vn records the value of the label at every vertex that you visit. Okay, so what is our goal now? Essentially, we want to study the quadrangulation Qn viewed as a metric space. So I should observe that because we chose theta n ln uniformly over the set of label trees with n edges, this Qn is in fact uniformly distributed over the set Qn of quadrangulations with n faces. Okay? So essentially we have a quadrangulation, a uniformly distributed quadrangulation with n faces, and essentially we want to understand the geometry of this object, the properties of this object when n is large. Okay, so we want to understand the metric space, which is the vertex set of the quadrangulation, equipped with a graph distance when n tends to infinity. Okay, and the idea is that we expect to get in the limit a universal object. Okay, we expect that. Okay, so I should say that we need to. Okay, this is a little bit informal. We will need to do some rescaling here to get a scaling limit. And if we can do so, we expect to get a universal object. We expect to get the same object for any particular class of planar maps we will start from. So we expect to get the same object for triangulations, for p-angulations, and or for more general random planar maps. Okay, this should be really something universal in the same sense as Brownian motion is a universal limit of a random walk path. Okay, so now what is the difficulty? Well, essentially, if we want to use this construction, you see that you have a lot of information. Well, you have an explicit formula here for the graph distance from this particular vertex V star. Okay, so this graph distance, well, as a simple explicit formula in terms of the label process. And we saw before that we have a limit theorem, scaling limit for the label process. So in a sense, in the scaling limit, we are going to understand very well the distances from V star. The point is that, this is probably the big difficulty, there is no simple formula for the graph distance dqn of VV prime. So what do I mean by a simple formula? I would mean a formula in terms of these pairs of contour functions, a contour function and the label function, which we know well. There is no simple formula if V and V prime are two vertices that are different from V star. Okay? So, of course, this graph distance is completely determined if we know this pair of functions. Because if we know this pair of functions, well, we know the label tree, so by bijection we know the quadrangulation, so this is determined. But there is no simple expression, okay? And of course, if we want to understand the properties of this when n tends to infinity, okay, we really need to understand distances between any pair of points, any pair of vertices. Okay, it's not enough to understand the distances from one particular vertex here. Okay, so what is the general idea now to, not to solve, but to try to solve this problem? Well, the idea is that first of all, instead of working with these objects, okay, we are going to work with a process indexed by the real line, in fact, indexed by pair of reals, okay, or pair of integers, as I would say, pairs of integers. Okay, so what do? Well, we simply use the contour sequence. So we introduce a function. So this was done by Gregory, dn of ij. This is dqn of vni vnj. So this is for every ij between 0 and 2n. Okay, so this is just a way of recording the distances in the quadrangulation. Okay, so recall that, okay, the contour sequence will visit all vertices. So if you have this information, you know all the distances. Okay, so it's just a way of, okay, if you want parametrizing all these distances with a process indexed by pairs of integers. Okay. So, well, again, unfortunately, there is no simple formula for this object in terms of Cn and Vn, but still there is a bound. Okay, there is a bound which is saying that dn of ij is less than Vni plus Vnj minus twice the minimum of Vnk for k in ij plus 2. Okay, so well, one should interpret this interval here correctly, in fact. Okay, so we should think not really of the interval 0 to n, but of the discrete torus. We should work modulo 2n. So if I is greater than j, this interval means that we take the union I to n, union 0j. Should just think that we are really on the torus. So if I is here and j is here, 0 here, okay, we go this way. This, okay? Okay, so where does this bound come from? Okay, I think this was explained by Gregory in the last lecture, and Nicolas also explained it in the exercise session. But very briefly, suppose you have your vertex Vni and Vnj. So suppose that your V star is here. So I explained to you how you can construct a simple geodesic from a given vertex to V star, just doing each time to the next vertex with smaller label. So you can construct a simple geodesic from Vni to V star, and you can do the same from Vnj. And if you are lucky, the two simple geodesics are going to merge at some point. So these are both geodesic paths. And this bound corresponds exactly to saying that you can bound the distance between Vni and Vnj just by looking at this particular path. You go this way along this geodesic until the merging point here, and then you go backwards to Vnj. Okay? And if you compute the length of this path, you will get the bound which is here. Okay? So in a sense, it's a very crude bound. If you try to use the same idea in a Euclidean space, okay, it gives you a ridiculous bound. Okay? But here, this bound is not so bad, in fact. Okay, so essentially, this bound is sufficient to give you tightness of the sequence of these processes. Now you have processes indexed by pairs of integers. Okay? and you rescale them, and you will get a tightness property. This was shown by Gregory in the last lecture. Okay, so what can you prove using this tightness? So this is, in a sense, the basic tool. You can prove that along a suitable subsequence. So that's very important. You are not going to deal with all values of n. You have to pick a subsequence of n. Okay? But along a sequence, you have a convergence when n tends to infinity. So I state the convergence sometimes for all the objects that are of interest here. So I rescale first the contour function. I rescale the label function in the way we've already seen. So my notation is something more like this, sorry. Cn of 2ns, Vn of 2ns. And now I look at these distances, okay? So I rescale them with the same rescaling constant. It's not surprising because we saw that these are the labels. Labels correspond to certain distances in the quadrangulation. So the scaling function is the same here. And you look at dn between 2ns and 2nt. So you have this big process here. So here you need to introduce two variables, okay? So st are going to be between 0 and 1. Of course, the first two components only depend on s. And you can get that this converges in distribution towards a triple. So you first have the Brownian excursion. Then you have this Brownian stake capital Z, as we saw before. And then we have a certain process, capital D of st. Okay? So this is for all st in 0, 1. Okay. Okay, so these are the objects we saw in the previous lectures. Indeed, if you look only at the first component, the convergence of this to the Brownian excursion, this is what we proved in the first lecture. Okay? So the convergence of the second component to the Brownian stake, so we saw that in the third lecture. Okay? And now the convergence of the third component here, well, as I said before, and this was shown by Gregory using this tightness argument. Okay? So you get this process capital T. Okay, so now this capital D has properties very similar to a distance. This is not surprising because it comes in a sense as the limit of processes which are defined in terms of distances in the graph. Okay? So capital D is almost a distance. It's a pseudo distance. So this means that it satisfies all properties of a distance except that you can have two distinct points which are at distance 0. Okay? So you can then define an equivalence relation, S equivalent to T, if and only D of St is equal to 0. And it's very well known that then if you take the, so this is defined on 0, 1. If you take the quotient space of 0, 1 for this equivalent relation, you can equip it with capital D, and this is narrow metric space. Okay, so now we saw that it's not difficult. We already did the proof the last time to show that this theorem implies, in fact, the solution to the problem we have here. It implies that if you look at the set of vertices of the quadrangulation, if you rescale the graph distance with this factor, this converges in distribution as n tends to infinity towards a certain limit, which I denote by capital MD, and M is just this quotient space here. Okay? So M is just the quotient space of 0, 1 for this equivalent relation. Okay. So it's really not difficult to prove. Okay, I should say that this is a convergence in the Gromov-Hausdorff sense. Almost show convergence here. Okay. And okay, this costs nothing. Okay, so you can do that, and this will make certain arguments easier in the sequel. So, okay, of course, it's a little bit formal because you don't know really what the equivalent relation here is. So you don't know what this quotient set here. Well, essentially there are two problems. First, you don't really know what the set capital M is, because you don't know what is the equivalent relation. And if you take a quotient set of the interval 0, 1 for an equivalent relation, this can be almost anything. Okay? It can be virtually, I think, any path-connected compact space. You can really get almost any space. So this is not telling much that you have a quotient of 0, 1. Okay? So if you want to understand better the limiting space, you must first understand what is this equivalent relation. Okay? And second thing, well, I did not say what capital D is. Okay? And in fact, there are good reasons for that. At present, we cannot really identify capital D. Okay? The only thing we can say, well, no, we can say several things, but in particular, we can say that we have the similar result as in the discrete setting. Remember, we had this connection here between distances in the map and labels in the discrete setting. So we have the same in the continuous setting. We have the property that D of S star, I should say what S star is. S is equal to ZS minus Z bar. So Z bar is the minimal value of Z. And it turns out that this minimal value of Z is achieved at a unique point. And this is the point which I called Z star. Okay, so S star, sorry. So this S star is the time corresponding to this minimum here. Okay? So if you want to do the comparison with the discrete setting, here in some sense, V star was the point also with minimal label. You could imagine that label of V star is -4, so that construction is coherent. And so again, this is the point with minimal label, and you have a formula for the distance from the point with minimal label to any other vertex. In terms of the labels, essentially it's the label of the point V minus the minimal label. It's exactly the same as here. Okay, so Z is really the analog. It's the limit of the rescaled labels. Okay. Okay, so it's really the label of S minus the minimal label here. Okay, so we have this formula for the distances, but again, it corresponds to what I said before. Here we know the distances capital D from a specific point, which is S star. Okay? And it's much more difficult to have information about the other distances. Okay, I will come back to that later. Okay, so, well, it was a little bit long for a summary, but it is just, again, to motivate what I'm going to do today, which will be essentially be characterizing this equivalent relation here. Okay, okay, there are no questions at this point? Okay, so I will come to the second part of the lecture. So the first thing I'm going to observe is that instead of looking at the quotient of the interval 0, 1, I can in fact consider a quotient of the CRT. Okay, so maybe some terminology first. This limiting space, capital MD, will be called the Brownian map. So I should not say the Brownian map, because at present, there is no uniqueness. Okay, I told you that we have to pick a sequence here. And, okay, the limit may depend on the sequence, so we don't know yet. Okay, so it's, okay. But essentially, well, everything I'm going to say will be valid for any Brownian map. Okay, so I will say the Brownian map, but it's really any possible limit that we have. Okay, so I will explain that the Brownian map can be viewed as a quotient of the CRT. So I remind you that what is a CRT? It's a tree, not in this way, coded by the Brownian excursion, as we saw in the second lecture. Okay, so the CRT is really the limit that you get if you look at the trees here. If you look at theta n, and you rescale theta n properly, in the scaling limit, in the Gromov-Hausdorff sense, you get the CRT. So what I want to say here is that well, in the discrete setting, we saw that the set of vertices of the quadrangulation is the same as the set of vertices of the tree. Okay, so of course, well, it's not surprising that if you go to the scaling limit, again, you can view vertices of the Brownian map as vertices of the tree. Okay, this is what I'm going to explain. So for this, I just need a simple proposition. So maybe okay, before I state the proposition, I recall that I have a notation for canonical projection from the interval 0, 1 onto the CRT, and the CRT itself was defined already as a quotient of 0, 1. So this is a canonical projection. And I remind you also of the definition of this equivalent relation. S is equivalent to T if and only if ES equal ET equals the minimum of ER for R belonging to ST. I should put S infimum T as supplemum T here. Okay? Okay, so this was the definition of the CRT. So you have, to define the CRT, you introduce, this is of course another different equivalent relation from the one I have introduced here. Okay? But what I'm saying is that in fact, the graph of this equivalent relation is contained in the graph of the other one. Okay? If you pick any ST in 0, 1, you have the fact that S equivalent to T implies dA of ST equals 0, and so S equivalent to T for the other equivalence relation. Okay? So this means that 2 times in 0, 1 that correspond to the same vertex of the CRT also correspond to the same point in the Brownian map. This is more or less obvious in a sense if you think of the discrete picture, but still I will give a proof. So how do you prove that? So suppose that S is equivalent to T in the sense of this equivalent relation here, defining the tree, the CRT. And I suppose, well, of course, I can assume that S is less than T. And then, so we have this property here. And then it's a simple exercise, if you want, to check that if you have this property, since the contour function here, suitably rescaled, converge to the Brownian excursion, okay, since this converges to this, then you will have a similar property at the level, at the discrete level. Okay, so what I want to say, then there exist integers in less than gn, such that in over 2n tends to s, jn over 2n, so this is a rescaling, tends to t. And so you have the same property as here, but now for the contour. So Cn of in equals Cn of jn equals the minimum of Cn of k for k between in and jn. Okay? So it's just, as I said, the fact that the Brownian excursion here is a uniform limit of the rescale contour. The rescale contour is, as we saw, it's a simple random walk excursion, so it's an object like this. So if you have this property here for S and T, well, you can approximate S and T in such a way that you also have this property. Okay? And now, what does it mean? Well, if you have this property, that, for instance, here, suppose, for instance, in is here, and jn is here. So you use this property, the contour function is the same, and in between in and gn, the contour function is larger. Okay? So what does it mean? It exactly means that, for instance, these 2 times here would correspond to this vertex here. Okay? That at these 2 times, the contour sequence takes the same value. Okay? That we are at the same point of the tree. So this implies that un in is equal to un jn. So with my definitions, oh, it's not u, it's v, sorry. Okay? So with my definition here, this implies that dn of in jn is equal to 0. And of course, because it has the same vertices. And now the scaling limit of dn is given by capital D with the right rescaling. So this readily implies that d of st equals 0. Okay. Okay, so this gives me, of course, a proposition. So there is nothing deep there. It's really somehow the way the construction is done. Okay, still there is, okay, now an interesting consequence of that, which is, as I said before, that you can write the Brownian map as a quotient of the CRT. So what do you do? Well, you observe that from the proposition, it implies that if you pick any 2 points in the CRT, one can define d of AB equals d of ST, where I choose a representative S of A in 0, 1 and a representative T of B in 0, 1. Okay? So the point is that this quantity will not depend on the choice of S and T. So there may be more than one possible choice for S or for T, but I will always get the same thing here. Well, this is a consequence of this property. If I replace S with an equivalent time, okay, I don't change the capital D. Okay, so capital D can be viewed as defined on the CRT. Okay, and you can then also say that for A and B in the CRT, A is equivalent to B. So for this equivalent relation, if and only if D of AB equals 0. Okay? And then you have the fact that the Brownian map M, okay, so this was the definition. Which is, I think, still written there. And this is exactly the same as if you take the quotient of the CRT. I keep the same notation for this equivalent relation on 0, 1 or on the CRT for obvious reason. Okay, so this is just isometric. It's very clear to see that both sets are in one-to-one correspondence, and moreover, the distances are the same by the, well, it's just property. Okay. So again, this is not at all deep, okay, but as we will see, it's useful to view the limiting object, this limiting metric space, as a quotient of the CRT. Okay, so perhaps a remark. Concerning, we already saw such, we already made such remarks when we were dealing with the Brownian snake, with this process capital Z. I already remarked that Z can be viewed also as indexed by the CRT, okay? That the value of the Brownian snake at S in fact only depends on the equivalence class of S in the CRT. So I can define, if you want, ZA equals ZS if A is a vertex of the CRT corresponding to S. Okay? So it's really the same property as here if you want. Okay? So really all the objects that play a role only depend on points in the CRT rather than on points in 0, 1. Okay? Okay, so I think I made this remark to say that the Brownian snake could be viewed as a Brownian motion indexed by the CRT. So it's really a process indexed by the points of the CRT. Okay, so let me mention briefly a consequence of this identification, which will be useful. Consequence is the fact that the dimension of M is less than 4 mutually. Okay, so why? Well, you can look at first the projection from 0, 1 onto its quotient for the first equivalent relation, the CRT. So this is what I called P. And then you will have another projection taking the quotient with respect to the other equivalent relation, which I denote by capital M. Okay? And now I'm claiming that both these projections are Hölder continuous with exponent 1/2, or if you prefer, a little less than 1/2, 1/2 minus epsilon. Okay? So you just have to look at the distance. The distance on T, this is what I denoted by D. It's defined in terms of increments of the Brownian excursion. So increments of Brownian motion are Hölder 1/2 minus epsilon. Okay? You just write the definition of D and you will get this property. Okay? Here the distance is capital D. Well, of course it's a little bit more complicated, but you just have to write the bound which Gregory wrote yesterday, I think, or on Monday, sorry. d less than d0, okay? And this d0 had an explicit formula also in terms of increment of the Brownian snake. Okay? So I will come back to this d0 later. Okay? But essentially, the Brownian snake is Brownian motion indexed by the CRT, so it's also Hölder 1/2. It's a Brownian motion, so it's Hölder 1/2. So you get 1/2 here too. Okay? So now you start from a set which has dimension 1, interval 0, 1. You apply a map which is Hölder 1/2, essentially. Here's the dimension. Well, a Hölder 1/2 map can only double the dimension at most. Okay, so the dimension here is less than or equal to 2. And for the same reason, the dimension here is less than or equal to 4. Okay? In fact, all these are equalities. So we will see later this, or this. We'll see later that these are equalities. Okay? But just a simple remark now to get the upper bound. Okay, so I will come to the third part of the lecture, in which I will state the main result. Okay. So essentially, this main result, as I said before, will identify the equivalence relation that allows us to make sense of the Brownian map. Okay? So essentially what I did until now was showing that for this equivalence relation, already the points, the times in 0, 1 that correspond to the same vertex of the CRT are identified. Okay. Okay, so if you want, I already did, in fact, the first half of the identification, if you want. So now I have to see if there are points of the CRT which are distinct in the CRT which are also identified. Okay, this is what I will do now. Okay, so this proposition which I just erased, okay, saying that this quotient is the same as the quotient of the CRT, is saying that, okay, already points of 0, 1 which are identified because they correspond to the same vertex of the CRT, well, they are identified in the Brownian map. Okay, so I can already make this identification. Now, do I have to do more identification to get the quotient here? Okay, this is a question which I will answer. Okay, so third part, identification. So here, I will need a definition. I will need to define intervals on the CRT. So remember the second lecture, we introduced the notion of a real tree. So you should really think of it as an object of this form, a connected union of segments, which is a tree. And so suppose I pick 2 points A and B, and for simplicity, I will suppose that A and B are leaves. Okay? So I want to define the interval between A and B. So what does it mean? Well, on my picture, it's very easy. It just means that I'm going to start from A. I'm going to move around the tree like this until I reach B. And the interval between A and B is going to be all the points that I'm visiting in this contour. So it's very easy. Now, you should remember that when I define the real tree, there was no real order in the definition, in the abstract definition of a real tree. There was no such order. So in principle, I cannot do this contour. Except that in my coding, when I do the coding by the Brownian excursion, I reintroduce this order. So in fact, I can do it using the coding by E. Okay, so let me give you the precise definition. Think that these points are leaves. Okay, so this means that if I remove A from the CRT, I do not disconnect the CRT. It's the same as saying that A corresponds via the projection PE to a unique S in 0, 1. Okay. If you want, A is a point of the CRT is an equivalent class for this relation, which I recalled a few minutes ago. And it's an easy exercise to see that a point is a leaf if and only it is an equivalence class which is a singleton, which has only one point here. You can check that also in the discrete setting. It's also true in the discrete setting. Maybe it's easier to see. Okay. And similarly, you can write B as P of T. T is also unique. Okay? So thinking in terms of contour, S will correspond to the time at which the contour visits A. T will correspond to the time at which the contour visits B. Okay, so I will assume that S is less than T. And I will simply define AB as PE of the interval ST. Okay? So this, you really should have the intuitive picture that you, at A, you go around the tree to the vertex B. Well, I'm also going to define the interval BA. And the interval BA will mean that I do the same thing. I go around the tree, but now starting from B. So I always go around in clockwise order. Okay, so I will do all this until I come back to A. Okay? So how is it defined? Well, it will be simply the image under PE of T1 union 0S. At time 0, you are at the root here. Okay, and then, okay. So again, you should view things. This coding, it would be better, in fact, to put, rather than 0, 1, to put the torus to identify 1 and 0 again. So you go around in the other direction. Okay, so, or maybe before I start the theorem, a simple remark. What is the intersection of these two intervals? Well, which points, I need a third color, which points are both on the orange contour and on the red contour? Well, essentially you see that these are these points here that correspond to the shortest path between A and B in the tree. Okay, so the intersections of these two intervals is just what I denoted before in this way. This is a line segment between A and B. So this is symmetric now. AB in this way is the same as BA. Okay, so what is the theorem? Almost surely, for every AB belonging to the CRT, we have A is equivalent to B, well, for the equivalent relation defining the Brownian map. If and only if, you will need A and B to be leaves of the tree for them to have a chance to be identified, but you need much more than that. You need that ZA is the same as ZB is the same, as a minimum value of the labels between A, B. And here you can put either this interval, this symmetric, or the other interval. So maybe I should write it, or the same with the other interval. BA. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that you are going to identify A and B if they have the same label. So I've used Z as a label in the continuous setting, this Brownian snake or this Brownian motion indexed by the CRT. If A and B have the same label, and essentially if between A and B, I get only bigger labels. Okay, so I want the labels that I encounter when I move from A to B following the contour of the tree to be all larger than the label at A or the label at B. Okay, so this is now a complete identification. So you really know what this equivalent relation here is. You really know what the space capital M here. Okay. So maybe I can explain it a little bit more on a picture. So the remark, which is that, as I said before, that there is a unique S star with the S star equals the minimum of all minimum of Z. Okay? And the corresponding, so S star, the fact that it is unique, in fact, ensures that if I look at the corresponding vertex on the CRT, this is a leaf. Okay? So you have somewhere here, maybe let's put it here. You have a point here, A star. This is the point where you get the minimal label. Okay? So obviously, if you want, you cannot have both these properties. Only there will be at most one of the intervals AB and BA that can work here. Because one of these two intervals, so in my picture is the interval, so on this example, A star belongs to BA. Okay, it belongs to the red contour here. And so obviously you cannot have this property. Okay? You cannot have this one, because this minimum will be the minimum of all labels, and it cannot be attained at A and B. Okay? So in fact, this equivalence relation, well, there is, okay, at most one of the two cases that can hold. And this corresponds to the interval that does not contain this A star. Okay, this is just a minor remark. So essentially, just perhaps again to summarize the result, what is this Brownian map? It's not that complicated. Well, you may think it's very complicated, but in a sense it's not. You have this CRT, which is a very nice object, very well-known probabilistic object, scaling limit of many classes of discrete random trees. You have this process Z. You should view Z as Brownian labels on the CRT. Just means that you assign to each point on the CRT a label in such a way that when you move on the tree, say along a segment here, the label evolves like Brownian motion. Okay, so this is just, if you prefer, it's a Brownian motion indexed by the CRT. And now what you do, well, you need to identify certain vertices. Okay, and this is what the theorem tells you. You can identify only pairs of leaves. And you are going to identify, for instance, these two vertices. So I draw, you identify them if they have the same label, and if in between the labels are larger. It's very easy to see that you will have such identifications. Okay? Essentially, you will have identifications in many places in the tree, for instance, like this. Okay, like this. And you have a certain pattern of identification. And you can also check, okay, of course my picture is not very good because for the CRT, most of the points are leaves. So you should think this way. Okay. And of course, it's a non-crossing pattern. Because of the definition, it's very easy to see that, okay, two of these arcs will not intersect. You cannot have a situation, for instance, where you, where you identify this point here to this one, there would be a crossing. This cannot occur. Just look at the definition, you see that it's not possible. Okay? And so you have these identifications given in an explicit way, and this tells you what the Brownian map is. Okay? Already with this identification, you know what is the topology. You don't need, in fact, to know what capital D here is, because you have a compact space, and so you have a certain minimality property of the topology. Once you know the space, in fact, you know the topology. So you know that this space, capital E induces a quotient topology, in fact, on capital M. Okay? So you know what the topology of the limit is, and this will be described by Gregory, I think, in the last lectures. Okay. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so I want to give an idea of the proof of the theorem. I need so perhaps I should immediately say that there is one direction which is obvious. Okay. So this implication, well, maybe you will not find it obvious, but it's easy at least. So why? Well, suppose you have A, B leaves. So as I said before, okay, so you can write A and B in this form. S and T are unique. Suppose that S is less than T, okay, as I did before. So you have written A and B like this. And so what is, if you have the property ZA equals ZB equals minimum of Z on AB, then this is what I said before. ZA is the same as ZS. ZB is the same as ZT. And this is going to be the same as the minimum of ZR for R between S and T. Okay? So you get this equality in terms now, looking at the processes at index by times in 0, 1. Okay? And if you remember, yesterday Gregory introduced this D0 of ST, which was precisely this quantity, ZS plus ZT minus twice the minimum of ZR on the interval ST. And so this property which is here is telling you that D0 of ST is equal to 0. Okay? And just by definition, and because this was also mentioned by Gregory yesterday, capital D is less than D0, so you will get D of ST equals 0. Okay. Okay, so this gives you the implication from the right to the left. So the real difficulty is to prove the other implication. Okay, so maybe I should also make a comment on the discrete setting. What does this mean, this, in the discrete setting? So in the discrete setting, so think of a very large discrete tree. And recall what was the rule if we wanted to draw an edge between two vertices U and V, okay, in the quadrangulation. So the rule was that V was the first vertex that I meet after U when I do the contour with smaller label. Okay, this means that the label of V is going to be the label of U minus 1. In the scaling limit, this means that I have the same label here and here. And because V is the first label that I meet after U with smaller labels, this means that in between, for all this yellow label here, the label is going to be larger. Okay, this is the first time that I meet a vertex with smaller label. Okay, so this really means that I have these properties. the label is the same at the 2 point, or differs by -1 in the discrete setting, and between the label is larger. Between the label is larger. Okay. And so what happens in the discrete setting that you may have such identifications for vertices which are far away from each other in the tree, which are very far away. And so when you pass to the scaling limit, you will have two different vertices in the CRT, two different A and B that will need to be identified. That's the reason. Okay, so maybe I should say a few words about the proofs. So I need a preliminary lemma. Okay, so this lemma will be about the volume of balls. So what is the volume? I denote by volume. This is the image of the Lebesgue measure on the interval 0, 1 under the projection PE. And so it's a measure which is sometimes called the mass measure on the CRT. Okay, so that is a canonical way of constructing a measure on the CRT, this object. And one can prove, for instance, that this measure is supported on leaves of the CRT. Okay. It's not difficult to prove, in fact. Just saying that if we pick T uniformly over 0, 1 here, the corresponding point is going to be a leaf. Okay. It's just a property of Brownian motion, in fact. Okay, so you have this mass measure spread on the CRT, and the lemma is telling you that, okay, you can fix delta positive, say delta between 0 and 1. Then, almost surely, there exists a constant C delta, such that for any A in the CRT and any R positive, you can bound the volume. So I'm going to look at the volume of a ball in the CRT, but not a ball not for the distance on the CRT, but for the distance capital D. So it's really a ball in the Brownian map, if you should think of it this way. I'm going to look at the volume of all x in the CRT, such that the distance capital D from A to x is less than R, and I can bound this by C delta R to the power 4 minus delta. Okay, so of course exponent 4 here is very important. So this is, if you want, a uniform estimate on the volume of balls for the distance capital D. So I have no time, of course, okay, I wanted to give a hint of the proof, but clearly I have no time. What's the idea? The idea that, so perhaps here, it will be enough to prove this for A equals A star. A star, remember, it was, well, it's written here. It corresponds, it's the vertex with minimal label. Okay. And suppose in this case, well, there is a nice thing, which is that property which I also wrote before. You can identify the distance from A star in terms of the Brownian snake. So D of A star A is the same as ZA minus the minimal label. Okay, so this Z bar is the minimal label. Okay. Okay, this property I already mentioned. It's similar to the discrete setting. Okay, we had the same property in the discrete setting. So in that case, in that particular case, when I should have put X here, when A is A star, you can understand this ball in terms of the Brownian snake. Okay, so you can do moment computations. You can find explicit formulas for the moments of these quantities and check something like that. And then, of course, you need an extra argument to say that if this works for A star, it works for all A. And it's basically a rerouting argument. Okay? You can prove that the entire object is invariant under a kind of rerouting, that A star plays no special role. Okay, maybe okay, I have no time to discuss that. So, in fact, once you have the lemma, you can get this other bound, this lower bound corresponding to the upper bound of the dimension. Okay? You can check that the dimension of M is greater than 4. Because it's well known that if you have, let's say, compact metric spaces where you have a uniform ball, you know that the volume of the balls of radius r are bounded by r to the power 4. Then automatically its dimension is at least 4. Okay? This is a very classical lemma on Hausdorff dimensions. Okay? So you just apply this classical result and you get this other bound. So you get, in fact, the equality here. Okay? So, in fact, this is related to what Philip mentioned, I think, in his lecture on Monday about the fractal dimension that you get for the scaling limits of maps. Okay? So here you can, in this model, you can prove exactly that the Hausdorff dimension is equal to 4. Okay. So, last part. I want to explain a little bit more the proof. Maybe I should. So, of course, I really have no time to give you a complete proof, but I hope I can give you the main idea. So maybe I should keep the theorem. So I remind you that this implication, well, this is the implication I want to prove. Okay, the other one is easy. Okay, so I'm going to consider two leaves of the CRT, A and B, and I'm going to assume, for instance, that they have the first property here. No, sorry. I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to assume that we have this. This is what I want to prove, okay? I'm going to, okay, yeah, so maybe, okay, so in principle, I should not consider leaves. I don't know yet that A and B are going to be leaves. But for simplicity, take A and B, I will assume that they are leaves. I should have mentioned that in this equivalence, I can just remove that, in fact. It's not necessary, provided I define properly what the intervals are. But the fact is that in this identification pattern, which I explained here, the only pairs of points that can be identified are really leaves. Okay, so really, this property cannot hold if I have points which are not leaves, in fact. Okay, so in order to give the idea of the proof, I will assume that A and B are leaves. So I can write in a unique way A as P of S, B as P of T. And I will assume that S is less than T, and they are both larger than S star. So remember what S star was, it's still written here. It's the time that corresponds to the minimum of Z. Okay? So essentially, we have a picture like this. We have somewhere S star here. We have, okay, so this is, I should write it A star. We have A here and B here. Okay, so now I'm assuming that A and B are equivalent. Okay, so I'm assuming, and okay, so as I said before, in this setting, well, in this case, only the first relation can hold, the second one cannot. Okay, so what this means is that I have ZA. Sorry. Okay, so I want to prove that the first relation holds. Okay, so A equivalent to B means that D of AB is equal to 0. That's the definition. Okay, so what I want to do, I want to approximate A and B by discrete points. So I want to say that the CRT is the limit of the discrete trees. And I want to pick vertices AN and BN in the discrete trees, which I denoted by theta n, that converge to A and B. So this makes absolutely no sense, because these points are not in the same space and so on. So this does not mean anything, but the way you can give a sense to this is via the contour, the coding by the contour sequence, if you want. Okay? So what does it mean? It means that AN is going to correspond in the contour sequence to time IN. BN is going to correspond, it should be V, I think, contour sequence, to Jn. And, okay, IN over 2S corresponds to S, to N, sorry. So IN over 2N tends to S, and Jn over 2N tends to T. Okay? So, roughly speaking, you approximate this picture by the discrete one. It should still be there. So somewhere here you have the minimal label. Here you have this AN and you have this BN here. Picture like this. Okay, and as on the discrete picture, which is there, I'm going to consider a geodesic from AN to BN. And of course, I forgot to say that this property here implies that the distances between AN and BN, so I should write dQn, the distances in the approximating quadrangulation, are little o of n to the power a quarter. Okay, because essentially once you have these properties here, you know that this distance rescaled by n to the power minus a quarter converges to this capital T. Okay? Okay, so you have the property which is there. In other words, the length of the geodesic is small in comparison to n to the power a quarter. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use. So now, the first step is to observe that for anything between A and B, ZC is greater than VA equals ZB. Okay, so I remind you of this definition. This is a line segment in the tree between A and B. Okay, so why is it true? Well, first, why do we have this equality? So this equality, first, ZA equals ZB is an immediate consequence of this, okay? So remember that ZA is just a distance from A star, okay. ZA minus Z bar is just the distance from A star to A. So we've seen that several times. And so, of course, if D of AB is equal to 0, this is the same as the distance from A star to B. And this is the same as ZB minus Z bar. Okay? So, of course, ZA must be equal to ZA. Okay, so why do we have this bound here now? So what I'm saying now is that if you want, I want to say that all the vertices, so my goal is to prove, in fact, that we have this property here. So I want to prove that for any C between A and B, ZC is bigger than ZA. Oh, this is what I want to prove. So in fact here I prove much less, okay? I look only at vertices which are on the line segment here between A and B. I should look at all vertices between A and B. Okay, so why is it true? You have to go back in the discrete setting. Maybe I will do the proof on the picture because otherwise it's going to be too long. So I pick here one point. So I look in the discrete case. So I pick one point, which is, I keep the same notation, it's obvious in the discrete setting, interval a and bn. This is the line segment. So this a and bn is going to be all these vertices here. Okay. So I've picked one of them, this one here. Okay? Yeah? I claim that the label of Cn must be essentially smaller than the label, must be larger than the label of An. Okay, so why is it true? Well, you look at the geodesic, which I call gamma n from An to Bn, and you look at, let's say, tau n, the subtree of theta n with root Cn. Okay, so you look at this subtree here. Okay. And you look at the first time when the geodesic enters this subtree. So it has to enter the subtree because, well, at least on my picture, because Bn is in the subtree, but An is not. Well, you have this property or you have the reverse property, so you can consider both cases. Okay. So the geodesic, there is a first point here where the red path enters tau n. Okay? And now you see that I call this point Wn, for instance. The label of Wn must be smaller than the label of Cn. Okay. Okay? So why is it so? You have to remember the construction of edges in the quadrangulation. This is an edge of the quadrangulation. This was saying that Wn was the first edge, the first vertex after this one, where you have a smaller label than this one. So this means necessarily that the label here is larger, because otherwise you would have met a vertex with smaller label before Wn. Okay? Because you do this contour here, and the first time you meet a vertex with smaller label is Wn. Okay? So this one has a larger label. Okay? This is what I've written here. Okay? So this is the point on the geodesic. The geodesic has a length which is small in comparison to n to the power quarter. So the label here is the same as the label as in n up to this order. Okay. Okay. And now you rescale everything. You pass to the limit, and you get this property. Okay? I'm a little bit fast, but there is not much time, so I have to. So I will finish with the second step. Okay. So for the second step, I will need, in fact, an extra assumption. I will make a simplifying assumption. Okay. So I will assume that gamma n lies in the interval a and bn for every n. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that my red geodesic is in this configuration. It stays between an and bn in the obvious. I mean, your geodesic could do something else. It could do something like that, for instance. Okay, it has no reason to stay between on this interval here. Okay. But I assume that it does something like that, and really, it's okay. You can eliminate the other cases in a similar way. So I'm not going to do it, but I will assume that really, if you want, it's in the interval on the tree, defined in the obvious way. We have this configuration here. Okay, so the idea is to argue by contradiction. So you suppose that you have the property that, okay, so you want to prove this. So you suppose that it does not hold. You already know that dA equals dB, of course. And now the point is that you are going to say that the ball centered at A will be too large in some sense if you compare with the lemma which is here. Okay, so the precise statement is as follows. You say that for any epsilon positive and any point x in the interval AB such that the label of A, the label of x is less than the label of A plus epsilon, and the label of y is greater than the label of A plus epsilon over 2 for any y in the line segment between, okay, I will introduce the definition, phi AB of x and x. So I need to define this object. Then you have the properties that d of AX is less than epsilon. Okay? So what is this object here? I should show it in the picture, okay? So I pick somewhere a point x here. It does not have to be a leaf, no matter. This point here will be phi AB of x. If you want, it will be the last ancestor of x lying on the segment AB. Okay. Okay, you can view it in this way. If you want, in the tree, it's the closest point to x on this yellow segment here. So what you require in this property, you require that the label of x is close to the label of A, or smaller than the label of A plus epsilon. But you require also that on all this line segment here, between x and this phi AB of x, the label of y is greater than the label of A plus something, say epsilon over 2. And then you automatically get that the distance from A to x is less than epsilon. So if you prove this, you easily get a contradiction, okay? And the reason is that under my assumption there, you can check that there are many points x with this property. So you can check that the volume, okay. You can check that the volume of the such point x so you call these properties I and 2I, say. The volume of the points x such that I and 2I hold is bounded below by a constant epsilon square. And this is much too large because these points have to lie in the ball centered at A with radius epsilon, and we know that the volume of this ball should be of order epsilon to the power 4, or a little less than epsilon. Okay? So this is a contradiction. Okay? So that's how we get the contradiction. So why do you have this lower bound here? Essentially, everything here is in terms of the Brownian snake, and you know very well the Brownian snake. So roughly speaking, the first condition will give you essentially a contribution epsilon, and the second one will give you another contribution epsilon in some sense, and this is why you get the epsilon square here. Okay, so I have no time to discuss that. So what I want to finish, just need 2 minutes to finish, I want to explain you why this is true. Okay? And again that's going to require an explanation on the discrete picture. Okay, so again I come back to the discrete picture which is there. So you just write the analogous properties
in the discrete setting. So what do you do in the discrete setting? You pick, say, a point u belonging to the interval between an and bn. I just look at the analog of the properties which are there. So I just say that the label of u, I want it to be less than the label of an plus epsilon times n to the power quarter. And the second property is saying that for any v belonging to, okay, as this obvious definition of phi n, an, bn of u and u. So this should be the line segment in the tree. So I have here that the label of v is greater than the label of an plus epsilon over 2 and to the power 1/4. Okay, so what I'm saying is that essentially I want to conclude that under these two properties, I have dn from an to u, which is less than epsilon and to the power quarter. Okay? So the property 2i, how do we use it? Property 2i, this implies that u is between the line segment between an and bn and gamma n. So this means that, you see, you have the line segment is the yellow segment here. The gamma n is this curve here. So this means that u is going to be somewhere in between the two curves, somewhere in this shaded portion. So why is that? Because if u is not below gamma n, so if u would be somewhere here, for instance, then it would have an ancestor on the geodesic. And on the geodesic, you don't have this property here. Okay, so you will have a point v. Okay, I should have. Okay, you will have a point v on this line segment for which this property does not hold. So your u is somewhere here between the yellow line segment and the red curve. And now the idea is that if you know that the point u is there, you can construct a simple geodesic from this point. So remember, this is what I showed in the beginning, a simple geodesic. You always go to the next vertex with smaller label. And at some point, the simple geodesic will have to cross the red curve. Okay. And say, let's say it crosses the red curve at the point w here, so my u is going to be here. And so what you will have, okay, so my time is over, so I'm sorry. But essentially, because starting from the point u, you construct this green curve that's going to cross the red one, and this is a simple geodesic. So this means that the distance in the graph between u and w is going to be a geodesic towards the root. So this will be the difference of the labels here. Okay, so these simple geodesics are geodesics towards the root. Okay. So you will have this property, and again, the label of w is the same as the label of an plus something small. And so what is here on the left is essentially the same as the difference between the label of u and the label of an. So it's smaller than epsilon n to the power quarter, plus a little o. Okay? And what is on the right, what is on the left, now is essentially the same dqn of u to an. Again, for the same reason that the w is on the geodesic from an to bn, and this geodesic has a length which is small in comparison to n to the power quarter. Okay. So if you look at what I have obtained, dqn of u of an is smaller than epsilon n to the power quarter. This is what I wanted to get. Okay? So this is what you get in the discrete picture, and you need to pass to the limit again, you need to pass to the limit to obtain this property here. Okay. So I'm sorry I was a little bit long, but I wanted to finish the proof. Thank you. Can I